So today our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to install all of the walls. Recently I've put in the ceiling, I've put in the insulation, I've put in the wiring, and so this is actually a really big step. The van's gonna look completely different after today, so I'm very excited to get started. And I think this is gonna be a pretty simple, straightforward project, but I should have known to never say that in a van build. So I'll be using the same type of plywood that I used in my ceiling install. It's 1/8 Baltic Birch, and it's super freaking light and bendy. I'm waving a white flag, I give up. My walls will also not be white. I just painted it with a mold preventative primer to kind of seal it off and be extra. I don't know if it actually makes a difference. I used it in my last van that I had for 4 years, and that ended up fine, so. To infinity and beyond. My neighbor just saw me do that, and now I feel uncomfortable.
Well, I just want to say you're the young woman with no sign of intelligence anywhere.
55.5. Remember that. 28 3/4. Remember that too. I'm putting you to work here. You've got a job. Let's get cutting. So I forgot that in my van build, I actually need this sheet to be shorter because I'll be putting in probably 2x4s, 2x6s in as the bed frame, and that will be using this cross beam as a support. So it has to be about 2 inches up so it doesn't get in the way of me installing these later on. No one's ever gonna see this portion that will have like a more messy, like in between you'll be able to see the insulation. I'm not worried about it. You won't be able to see it later on. But I do want to cut off those 2 inches of this sheet now for when I have these going all the way across as the bed frame. So that is what I'm going to do now. It's like a super frustrating part of van building is you have to know everything you're going to do in the future to do the current step. It's like you can't just come out here and build the walls. I had to make a map of where all the wiring holes will be. I had to, account for the bed framing. All these different things, I'm finding that one of the biggest mistakes I've made in this van build that I didn't make in my last van build is that I have just been so stubborn this time around, trying to do one project at a time, start to finish, before starting another project. But the further I'm getting in this build, the more impossible that's getting. I've already spent numerous days wiring, but I can't finish the wiring until the walls are all up, and I can pull the wires through the walls and attach the devices. I can't paint the walls until all of the wiring is fully done, and I am sure I will have to make no changes. And then I can use spackling on all of the edges to make it smooth and then never have to take it down. Cross your fingers, knock on wood. Even though I'm frustrated with not being able to really check tasks off my to-do list as much anymore, I am grateful that I'm finally at a stage where the tasks I'm doing are actually making visible progress on the build. I have a friend who once said, you hit this point in the build and everything just goes so much smoother and it's faster sailing through the rest of the build. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. Installing an electrical system, wiring, a heater, air conditioner, drilling holes in your van, all of those things are 10 times more complicated and time-consuming than woodworking. There were so many more things to learn before and so many more things that could go wrong, but I finally feel like I'm really in the groove of things. It wasn't as wrong as I thought it was gonna be, so. In my first van build, I started out having never touched a single power tool, but I had gone to school for fashion design, and after building my benches and cabinets in my last build, I started thinking of woodworking as just sewing with wood, which helped me just feel like I knew more about what I was doing. It's really the same concepts, just with different tools and materials. Plus, if you're gonna comment that sewing is a lot safer, I would actually beg to differ. I have shed a lot of blood when sewing, including in my first week of fashion school when I accidentally ran my finger through an industrial sewing machine and the needle went through the bone in my finger. And then when I went to the ER to get it out, they were out of medicine to numb it and they just ripped it out anyway. So my point being, woodworking is actually really enjoyable and not too complicated to learn, but the best part is that with wiring, there was a lot of pressure on your safety to get it right, But now if you cut something wrong, it'll just add a little more, you know, like personality to your van. Next, I'm drilling holes into the wood for my wires to fit through using a step drill bit. And this first hole is for my security camera display screen. They should make these so that each tier is a different color, because how am I gonna get this in there and then know what number I'm at? Am I just gonna have to like count?
What the hell are you doing?
You just smoldered.
Next, I needed to make a larger hole for my air conditioner wires, which there are a lot of, so this hole needed to be much bigger. However, it will be hidden in my upper cabinets, so it doesn't need to be perfect per se. Not my best work.
WWE takedown.
I was gonna recut it, to be honest, but... Now I'm sanding down and priming my newly cut boards. I decided to paint the other side of the boards once they were already on the wall because it just made the process faster. And honestly, I was originally planning on using plaster to cover the edges of these boards to make it smooth, but now that I've been thinking about it more, I'm worried about it cracking when I'm driving, so I ordered some drywall tape, and while all of those lines on the driver's side don't matter because they'll be under the upper cabinets, I am worried about the ones on the ceiling and the passenger side. So if anyone has some ideas on how to make these edges smooth without cracking over time, please let me know. That would be super helpful. Van building is a workout. I have this weird thing where like I notice whenever I turn off the music, I start to like just stare at the van and be like overwhelmed, but then I'll play like girl pop confidence, you know, music, and I'm like, I've got this. This is a breeze. This is great. So that's why I'm saying I have to go put the music back on before I start to go back into like existential crisis mode. So let's start. Perfect. In this next wall, I'll have one of my wall outlets and 2 USB outlets near the top in my cabinets. Plus, I'll have another USB outlet down near the bench. I traced the gray electrical box onto the wood and drew circles where I thought I wanted the USBs, and then measured so I knew at the end when I drilled it would all be parallel. When it came to the walls in my last van build, I was doing a tour with Tiny Home Tours, I believe, and I remember the guy saying to me that it felt like a prison in the back of my van because there were no windows and all of the walls were just plain white and I didn't have upper cabinets in the back. I just kind of think about that a lot. It never really felt like a prison to me, but once he said it, I couldn't unsee it. But at the same time, I like the big empty open walls and I like using light colors in my van build because it just makes the space feel so much more open. All right, so it needs to be 1 1/4. And I find that people who have a lot of things on their walls or use darker colors, or people who have a lot of upper cabinetry or tall cabinets in the middle of their van, it just really closes off the space, and my personal goal in my van is for it to just feel as spacious and open as possible. But also, I don't even know what I would put on the walls. Honestly, the interior design has been my greatest enemy in this van build. I've been so indecisive, and on my last van build, I didn't even think about it. I was just so focused on learning how to build that I just painted everything white and then the ceiling pink and just didn't even think about the aesthetic until all of the building was done. And at that point, I was just happy that I was able to make the woodworking and plans that I had drawn come to life and actually had made things real. But this time around, I have been so focused on the aesthetics and my indecisiveness has been crippling me. So I would actually love to share some of my sketches with you guys. I would love to hear your opinions on colors and designs. I think I'm going for a feminine Lord of the Rings or like outdoor fairy vibe. Just think like castle, Roman columns. Here's some of the images from my Pinterest board, which of course I have a very expansive van build Pinterest board. And this is the wallpaper that I was thinking of lining my cabinets with, but my parents said it looked like a great grandma's, so that made me more indecisive. I don't know. I'm apparently just struggling with my commitment issues on this, and I need to pick paint colors honestly in the next few steps and just get this rolling. So it's coming down to the end of the line and I just need to choose. Okay, so step one, I'm gonna be installing a 250 watt solar panel right here underneath my bed. I think that it's gonna just get so, I'm sorry, I couldn't keep the bed on. I hope you know I'm not installing a solar panel there. But I did keep the box from my solar panel so I can use it to make a template. But that would be crazy. I guess you could like put one on the floor and like have it be a pull out. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm just being a silly goose. How long can I stare at the walls instead of building and pretend like I'm thinking of things to do when I'm actually just procrastinating doing the work? The answer? A year. Next, I'm working on the wheel well arch wall. And here you can see I'm using a very professional method here to make my template. I like to call this guess and check, and then glue some back on if you have to, because it saves a lot of time, honestly.
Not winging it isn't really what they do.
What exactly is it that they do?
Kick names, take ass.
Yeah, that's right.
And here she is holding up her template like a man on Facebook who's just caught a fish. Very proud, very, very proud. And as expected, my template fit in some places and was just way too big in others and was too small in some other spots, so I just cut off the two small parts and cut out a piece to replace the missing chunk. And this went so much faster than me trying to use any of those other techniques. I feel like I'm giving bad advice here, but like it worked. So, and it was pretty fast, so like what more could you want? What's happening? I'm making it uglier. You know what? This is fine. This is fine. No one's gonna see it. The phrase, "no one is going to see it," has almost become my mantra of sorts at this stage, but it is true, and no one's going to be able to see this board behind the water tank, so I really don't need to stress it. And I just really want to get this van built and back on the road. However, I will say I'm really trying hard not to adapt that mindset too much, because I'm finally at the parts of the van build that will forever be visible, for the most part. And the desire to just rush it and be out on the road and to just be done is so strong. But I also just want to be really happy and proud of the end results. One of the first things van lifers do whenever you meet them is they're like, "Do you want a tour of my van?" And everyone just gives each other tours of their vehicles. In my last van build, I just had moments where people would come in and I just felt like a kindergartner project, which is fine, and it worked. And when it was just me, I was so proud of it. But then I would tour other people's rigs who, honestly, if I'm being honest, were mostly professionally done builds, and I would feel so self-conscious. And so honestly, what I'm realizing as I'm saying this out loud is I just need to work on my confidence and like being proud of my work and not comparing myself. But you know, that's not gonna happen, so let's be more realistic. I've been trying that for years, that's not happened yet, so instead what I'm going to do is hold myself to a ridiculously high standard of trying to have a professional looking build, which I will inevitably fall short of. And the interesting thing is, I have a friend who knows a lot of van builders and tours vans all the time, and they constantly tell me that they see these vans in real life and they don't actually look like what they look like on social media, and that when you're up close you can see the cracks and the issues and whatever, or you learn what they're using and you're like, why are you doing that in your van build? And so the comparison is literally just not fair. They start teaching you at like 5 years old that comparison is the thief of joy. I think the point I was originally trying to make here was that I want to go slow on this van build and not rush things and have it end up be beautiful. And I still I still believe that. I still want to make that point. I just also am realizing that that point that I want to make is because I'm holding myself to the standard of an end product that doesn't even exist anyway. But just to circle back to my original point, is I find myself wanting to cut corners just to get this done. And I don't really want to be doing that. I want this van build to be my best work, not X, Y, and Z on Instagram's best work. I think one gift I really had in my last van build was that I didn't think anyone was ever going to see it, but that did lead me to cutting a lot of corners. I didn't even use a sander at all in my last van build, and I don't want to do that this time around. I want to put my best foot forward, but then I want to acknowledge that my best foot forward is not going to be what a professional van building company who builds vans every week is going to look like. But this time around, I just feel a lot more pressure because I know that this van's going to likely be seen by a lot of people. My last van build ended up being seen by over 100 million people. But what I noticed as I was waiting for these negative comments to come in was that no one commented about the giant hole I made never fixed. No one commented that I didn't sand before I painted. No one commented that there was a hole in my floor from where I dropped a knife. No one commented that my table lock was not in the most convenient spot because I forgot to make a spot for it when I installed it. I could go on, but I think you get the point. No one cares as much as we care about our mistakes, and no one will notice them as much as we notice them, and yet we inevitably want to stress over them and just we feel inadequate because of them, but people really honestly will not notice. And so all of that stress is really just silly. 75% of van builds is trying to find the tool that you misplaced. The final wall I'll be doing in this video is my sliding door, and I made another template by clamping cardboard to the door, then tracing the edges and cutting it with a box cutter knife. I will say I'm glad I used the 1/8 wood because in my last van I used 1/4, and it took a lot of clamps to get it to bend to the curve of the back doors especially, and this was so much simpler, so much easier. Also, this wood barely slid over my external lock that I installed a while ago, so that was definitely a good choice picking the thinnest wood possible. However, I definitely want to go back and install a wooden support bar across the middle for more support so I can actually screw things into this wall eventually, because the 1/8 is just pretty flimsy and not going to hold much. And a mistake I made in my last van build was thinking I could do the sliding door wall last because it doesn't affect anything, but actually I had installed my kitchen unit and then I couldn't figure out how to screw and template around the installed screwed into the floor kitchen unit. So I never actually made this wall last time, and it was only ever just a tapestry over some Reflectix for years. So this felt super great to finally have a finished wall here, something I never had in my last van build. And I didn't actually screw it in all the way. I just put 2 screws in each board to make sure the fit was right, but I want to paint it off the door so I don't get paint on the metal or the van, and it just has clean edges overall in the end. And here is the final product with all of the walls. There is one spot that is empty still because the kitchen will actually have a back wall that will cover that, so I didn't feel the need to use a double wall there, but overall I'm pretty happy with it, I think. I'm nervous about how I'll smooth out the edges, but I'm excited to be one step further in this van build and one step closer to being back on the road.